Okay, so we're here today to. I want to open with two polls that I think will set the stage. These polls ran as exclusives, thanks to Mr. Ruddy here, and they set the stage for what we're talking about. So the first poll is from Summit.org and done by McLaughlin and Associates, and the finding was from last week: a third of Americans are afraid that if they express their views, and we know what those views are, their religious views, that they'll lose their jobs. Let that sink in for a minute. The other finding is something around 44% of Americans are afraid to publicly express what they believe. So this is the actual results of cancel culture. Second poll is from Convention of States, done by Trafalgar Group, and this poll was interestingly done right before the Ukraine story became big, which was the Justin Trudeau story in Canada, the trucker strike in Canada. And the finding was fascinating. The finding was, and this is what I want to toss to all of you guys first so you guys can help me translate this for the audience. The finding was Republicans and independents were asked, do you approve or disapprove of what Prime Minister Trudeau is doing? Huge majorities of Republicans and independents were opposed. 67% of Democrats were for it. And then, that's not the only strange thing. The second strange thing was 17% said they had never heard of the story at all. So clearly we're in an age where some people are getting their media from one source, some people are getting their media from another source, and now what I want to bring this back to is the elephant in the room in this convention, which is faith, and how that plays into this conversation. So first question, and I want to go through all of you, just a quick answer on this. Is it fair to say that the mainstream media or the corporate media is biased against faith? Chris Dolan.
Repeat the question is what?
The mainstream media, or what we might call the corporate media, does it have an intrinsic bias against faith? As a general, yeah.
I would say yes, based on the people who work there, right? So I don't think it's a strategic way that they're going about doing it, but I think there's a groupthink mentality that takes over, and I think there's concern when people think for themselves, and the religious base gives them ability to think for themselves, right? So the more you get in the way of that, the more you can dictate what goes on. And I'm not saying everybody's coordinating and doing this together. I think it's an evolution of thought. I think it's an evolution of age groups. I think that the younger reporters coming up are now advocates. They don't want to report the news. They want to promote their concepts and their beliefs. And I think the delineation between news and opinion was killed over the last 20 years. And really, I always look at the online pre-Obama, post-Obama, not because of Obama, but because of the news cycle. The news cycle changed on that run. And from that point on, everything's been different, and the evolution keeps going. So costs, page views, pursuits of different things, and that's where it goes. So I don't think there's an effort to silence religious people, but I think as a whole it happens because of the people running these organizations.
Okay, Chris.
Well, I wouldn't say there's bias in the media against faith. I would say that the media is at war with people of faith. And this war has been going on for decades, but it's really getting more and more momentum. And we're seeing it in a lot of poll data, just like the numbers you were saying. I mean, we live in a country where 50% of the people in the United States think if you don't take a vaccine, you should be locked up and imprisoned. I mean, a lot of these come from very secular values where they don't respect religious faith. And at the end of the day, they're not going to respect civil rights and civil liberties. And we're seeing that. They don't really believe in your right to free speech and other things that all of the traditional liberal, classic liberals, like Alan Dershowitz, who's on Newsmax quite a bit, they tend to espouse values that allow for free speech, free discussion. But that's all disappearing, and it's all part of this war on the secular war. David Horowitz wrote the book on this, which is Dark Agenda. the effort to destroy Christianity, and I think we're seeing it in the public square.
Josh, this is not an American-born phenomenon. Can you add to what they were saying?
Yeah, well, so on this point, I would say absolutely there's a war against faith in the media and in politics. And the way this takes form, I think, is political correctness. That is 1967 Mao Zedong in communist China. And basically the idea was this. You are politically correct if what you're saying aligns with what the party is doing. What the Communist Party is doing at the time was the Cultural Revolution, right? Killing rightists, killing your landlords, persecuting teachers. That was politically correct in China in 1967. Now it's the same thing. You can have your religion, you can speak your religion, you can have your values, but if you say or express any value that opposes the system that they want to push, you will be attacked relentlessly. And so you are free to have your faith, you're free to express your faith, but if you say anything that's an expression of value that goes against the political interest, then you'll be attacked. I would say it's very much like more like an inquisition than anything. You have a new religion that's informing politics and media, and if you go against that new religion informing politics and media, which is socialism, then you will be a subject of persecution through this new inquisition. And I'd say that's exactly what's happening right now, under the guise of political correctness.
I agree with that. I agree with all of these comments, but the question is why? The godless have always resented and feared those who believe in God. Why is that? Because if you believe in God, you have a fundamental foundation built on truth. You actually respect truth, you believe in truth. If you don't believe in God, you are a God, and most of the mainstream media are godless. They no longer value truth. So journalism used to be a noble profession. It still is a noble profession, but the mainstream media, they don't practice journalism. They no longer respect truth because they can't manipulate you into believing something that's not true unless they can convince you that it is not true.
And actually, maybe they do practice journalism. They just don't execute journalism. You stepped on something so pivotal that I want to bring up, Phil, and I need all your help on this. I try to explain to people all the time. I grew up in New Hampshire reading the Manchester Union Leader. The slogan was, "There's nothing so powerful as truth," Daniel Webster. I'm in trying to explain the media environment, people say to me, well, there's conservative media and there's left-leaning media. And this is what I want you to, I don't think that's true anymore. I think there's, and I really need some help on this, guys. I really think that there's truth-based media and there's fiction. And I don't even need to name those outlets, but they're either ignoring the story or they're telling a version of the story that just isn't true. Can you react to that, Phil?
Well, their truth is truth by omission. So they will omit certain stories that they don't want you to know about. It was about a month ago that John Durham decided to reveal that somebody in Hillary Clinton's campaign had wiretapped the Trump campaign when he was running for president, and it continued on into his presidency. Now, Mark Levin, who I respect greatly, says that's the #1 scandal in the history of this country. You would think if that was the #1 scandal in the history of the country, the mainstream media would have reported on it. But they didn't. CNN gave it 2.5 minutes of coverage, and mostly negative, and it was not on NBC, ABC, CBS. I didn't see it in the Washington Post. I picked up a copy of the New York Times on the Sunday after this story was revealed, expecting to see it above the fold. New York Times didn't report on it. They don't want you to know certain things. They figured out if we can just not report on it, we can pretend it doesn't exist. Now, why did they not want you to know about it, and why did they not want to report about it? Because they were complicit. They were part of it. For years, that was their narrative, that Russia had influenced the Trump campaign, when in fact it was not Donald Trump being influenced by Russia.
Okay, so
I might just add, Phil makes a really good point here. And we saw before the 2020 election, there was these serious allegations about Hunter Biden's laptop The story was broken by the New York Post. The New York Post leans conservative, but it's not known as being right-wing. And there's been no evidence to counter the idea that this was not Hunter Biden's laptop. So there was very serious allegations made from what's in there. So not only did the press not report, so it wasn't picked up at all by any of the press, but a lot of media access points, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all worked to block the story from the Post being shipped virally by social media. There's a level now of mendacity and conspiracy by some of these companies to block. You know, if you had if it was illegal, you could file a RICO statute against some of these companies for what they're doing. And we're seeing it now. You can't talk about vaccines. You can't talk about voter fraud. You can't talk about the 2020 election. And I think all of the folks here that have been in the media are seeing it across social media. And it's wrong. It's censorship. It so clearly violates our constitutional rights. But the spirit of America, I mean, and there should be an outcry, and there isn't.
But while it is right, Chris, it's wrong and despicable and disgusting, it creates an unusual, golden opportunity for those of us on the other side of the argument, like Newsmax and others.
I'd like to stop this panel right now because Phil Boyce is on fire so much that I'm actually just going to quit and walk off the stage and have him moderate. It's like he's doing my work for me. Phil, I owe you something later, okay? Literally, that's what I was thinking. So, Josh, you know, isn't truth and tradition is your slogan, right?
That's right.
Did I get that right?
Truth and tradition.
Okay, why?
Well, you know,
based on what Phil was saying.
Well, this is kind of the understanding at Epic Times of what media is. You know, we went through this long process of trying to figure out, you know, because we're a newish media company, right? Figure out why people read news. And the simple solution was this. People read news because they want an accurate understanding of what the heck is happening in the world. And the mission of a journalist is actually very simple. You don't need to make it that complicated. It's to provide people with an accurate understanding of the world. That means you just give people the information, you give them the context to understand it, and that's it. It's that simple. And I think media have made it so much more complicated trying to push these agendas and, you know, spin things like you were mentioning they do. And yet it does leave leaves a huge opportunity for us. When you present truth and you just say this is what happened, it has an incredible power to dispel lies. And I think that's why they want so badly to silence people like us, because when you expose their lies, like the Trump-Russia scandal that they threw together, it makes them look very bad. And it's in their interest to try to pretend like it didn't make them look very bad. And so they try to hide it, they try to censor, they try to get rid of it. But I think there's only so much they can do to get rid of it as long as people like us are speaking out about it.
And Chris Dolan, the Washington Times, now Chris Ruddy, who's sort of a historian of journalism, would know this, but the Washington Times actually started for that very reason, right? If I remember, in the early 80s?
Freedom, faith, family.
Yeah.
The underlying tenets of the paper, and they still exist today. To back up what you're saying, we believe that news is for us to provide people information so they can make decisions about the world around them. And we, on the news side, that's their whole goal, is what information we can get you. On the opinion side, will help you decide what you should think. You know, Charlie does it all the time, but we really try to separate between the news and the opinion. And we're getting silenced all over the place. Our reach has been stamped on beyond belief. We've been shut down on all these stories. We covered Hunter. We covered last week's story on the Russia-Trump stuff. We're still blocked on Facebook on the story we have. And our story is completely legitimate. It's completely sourced. It's all backed up by the documents. So you don't see a lot of what we do, and our reach keeps getting smaller and smaller. What the Times always was able to do was, it was created for a conservative voice in D.C. when there were no conservative voices. It had a conservative editorial page, so people could duke out ideas. Even conservatives. There's fights among conservatives we cherish covering. It's important. And some of the concern is embarrassing them, but we don't believe in embarrassing people. It's truth always wins out, right? So if we can get you the information and you can see it, you're better off. And right now, the reach is really being trampled on, and it's all being done beneath the veneer of fact-checking. started fact-checking, which we all know is kind of a questionable thing to begin with, but it's already moved into, if we get fact-checked, they want to tell us what to put in stories. There's nothing wrong in a story. They say that it's missing a study that they know about, or it has something. So they're going to block it because they don't like the content that's in it. Not that it's false. It's they don't like what's in it. And now that's starting to happen more. And now the evolution of this is going is there's a new thing, NewsGuard, which anybody in the business knows about. They rate your site based on a whole bunch of things. And it's a bunch of young activists. So they're trying to block, and we're losing advertising revenue, we're losing all kinds of stuff, and it's all because of this movement.
And it's not like a small thing. This is a massive, we talked about the war on people of faith and media that supports that. But there's been a war, a brutal attack, and especially over the past year. Chris just referenced the loss of revenue. We have Newsmax, but all the guys up here and all the conservative media, they've all been deranked, delisted, depressed on Google, on YouTube. And what this does is it cuts the number of people coming, even the ability to find a story. Like if we break a story and you put Newsmax and we did a story on Matthew Faraci, it wouldn't come up for the fourth page. Now in the past, it used to come up on the first page. It was very relevant. They would always say the news should be relevant. So they're doing this against all the conservative. We're all seeing this massive decline. And that affects our revenues. So we don't have the ability to conduct journalism because we can't pay the reporters. And they're doing this against all the conservative media. Now, Fox is owned by a sister company is News Corp, which was based in Australia. And the Australian Parliament, with the support of News Corp, moved to force Facebook and Google to pay these content companies. What News Corp did, which again is the sister company of Fox, is cut a deal with Google and Facebook so they get paid. They get paid when most media companies don't get paid for their content in these search engines or being shared socially. And if you notice, Fox doesn't talk about the attack that big tech is making on conservatives. If you go onto YouTube, you'll see Fox videos all over the place. Fox makes tens of millions of dollars from big tech now because of the deal they cut. But they're not fighting for all of our side, our companies that are out there who are under attack by big tech, who are being delisted and deranked.
Well, piece of advice. So everybody in the audience is hearing this and they're getting frustrated. So if you can't find these different sites on Google or the places that people look, what should people be doing? Give people an action item. Everybody, give people one action item. Josh?
Right now, it's word of mouth. So you got to tell people about it. Because when it comes to Epic Times, we're deplatformed by Facebook for the most part. They try to censor us quite a bit. YouTube censored most of our channels. Google censors us. And not only do they censor you, but they put like fact check warnings where they have these fact check powerhouses that are financed by the same.
This could be true. Warning, this could be true.
Yeah. And then it comes out like you were mentioning that they fact check people based on things they say is false. And then it turns out what they were saying was false the whole time. The Trump-Russia scandal, like the reporting that Epic Times did.
The Hunter laptop story turned out to be true.
Or the Wuhan virus story.
Yeah.
I think
we did a whole documentary about the Wuhan coronavirus and the origin in China, and we got censored like you wouldn't believe. We had 150
You would
million
think at
views
some
on it.
point there would be such egg on their face that they couldn't show their face anymore.
Yeah.
But no, they just wipe it off and show their face again like nothing to see here. When they're obviously lying to the American people.
And the thing is, too, is they don't backtrack and tell people, hey, we were wrong to fact check this guy. Hey, we got the story wrong.
How many times did they admit they were wrong about Trump and the Russia collusion story? I didn't see any retractions.
I'm still waiting.
Right. We're waiting on it. We're waiting. Here's the thing, though. For every time this happens, the American people come up with a solution, and this solution is some platform that is not going to be the victim of cancel culture. So Rumble has become much bigger now because that's a platform where you can actually go and you're not going to be canceled. So, I've got Eric Metaxas sitting here. He's got a lifetime ban on YouTube. For what?
He should be honored by that, by the way.
We were removed from YouTube last summer for a whole week because we had Rand Paul, who's a medical doctor, say that he did not believe masks worked, and there's a lot of scientific evidence that shows that they don't work. There's not a lot of scientific data to support they do work. And they said, well, that was misinformation on COVID. And so Newsmax was not able to post a video for a full week. Like Newsmax, since the last election, we've had close to 7 million downloads of our app, which is free. But you can go directly to everyone, Washington Times app, Epic Times, Salem Radio, download our apps and go to us directly. We're just seeing millions and millions of people engage that way, and it's been very powerful. And I think it's this direct consumer to news that you have to start doing, because if you just rely on the search engines or what Facebook feeds you, your life is not going to be great.
So here's your action item for everybody watching, listening. If you really care about free speech, if you really care about religious freedom, go to each of these guys' apps, download them. If there's a subscribe button, put your money where your mouth is and subscribe. You remember back in the day, NPR came with a free tote bag, or maybe that was PBS. You don't get a tote bag, but you get the truth, which is better. Okay, so this is our shameless infomercials section. But seriously, these guys are standing for you. Are you going to stand up for them? Can we get a round of applause, please?
I think another thing that gets lost is on, news organizations are serialized coverage of events. What we know on Monday may be different on Friday. What we report on Wednesday, the following Wednesday, can be completely different. That doesn't mean we got it wrong. It just evolves and changes. And what you're seeing is when we get blocked on Facebook and our story may come back, or, we wrote January 20, I think we're credited with the first story out there that was blocked by Facebook on the Wuhan lab. It wasn't a big story. It was a little thing that we put up, and we had people on the record and sourcing and everything, and that was blocked. But at the end of the day, we need to be a part of your daily routine or part of your habit. When we were a newspaper, we were thrown on your doorstep every day, and it really didn't matter to us whether you were doing the crossword or reading sports or reading politics. As long as you supported us and got us, we were out there covering things for you. We've lost that model, right? So for us to survive, we can't survive on a page view. We can't survive on a click. We need people to support it, whether it's for a tote bag or not. It's a great model. We need people to subscribe and know that when they come to us, they're going to get fair treatment of information. And they may not need the information every day that's there, but when things happen, they're going to want to have a place to go, and we're there for you. So that's really key.
Chris Dolan, can you tell us a little bit? We're talking about what they don't cover or how they cover it in the wrong way. How do you guys all, I'm fascinated by this, and I have a captive audience because I would love to take you all to dinner and ask those questions anyway. How do you decide what to cover? What is your rubric for that decision point?
You starting with me? Yeah. Well, in Washington, it's pretty simple. We're looking at certain agencies and we're paying attention to what they're doing, and a lot of it's reporting what's coming back to us. I mean, there's news of the day that we cover because we feel obligated to put out basic information that's coming out of Washington. But how we dig deeper is by watching the lawmakers, by talking to them, seeing what they say, what they're backing up their arguments with, and then it's digging deeper into what are they using to back up their arguments. And that's the progression. So you're going to start a story, the first day story may be as simple as who, what, when, where, why, and then it's coming back and saying, well, this is really important. Culturally, it's important for different reasons, and then we start deciding. And for us, it all comes down to faith, family, and freedom, right? So anything that's an attack on a Second Amendment right, a First Amendment right, that's really important. If we feel like there's big encroachment of government, that's important.
Well, okay, let's talk about, for example, let's get real. The COVID lockdowns, churches getting shut down, right? Walmart's open, Starbucks is open, churches are closed, synagogues are closed. Okay, so that happens. Walk me through what you guys what your reaction to that was.
Fortunately, we have a great relationship with a lot of churches. Guys like Jack Hibbs, a pastor in Southern California. So we put them on, and we let them tell their story. John MacArthur, who kept his church open and defied the local mandates that he shut down. We put him on, so we get to tell their story. The churches that shut down or followed that edict, shame on them, because they didn't have to. They could have stayed open.
Boy, that was a weak applause. My goodness.
A little bit more.
Are we
yeah.
Jeez.
But think about the media hypocrisy during that period. They allowed the woke, cancel culture, George Floyd protests, mass without social distancing, without masks. That was okay, but if a congregation of 50 people wanted to go and social distance in a church, they should be arrested. And it shows you again how these rules that they're creating are meant to suppress people of faith, conservative media. And that's the type of thing we would cover, is looking at how they were treating different groups with similar circumstances.
Yeah. Do you guys all watch like what each other writes about? Just because obviously not everybody can know every story. I
think you have to. You know, one thing I've always believed is that telling the truth and really hitting the news right, it takes a willingness to be attacked. You have to be willing to be attacked, because if you're telling the truth, typically you're going to go against what a lot of people have been told. That's just the reality of it. Sometimes they may not realize you were right until maybe a couple years later. That's the reality of it, right? But as long as you have fearlessly told the truth, people will remember that you were the one who told them the truth and everybody else lied to them. They will remember this. And so I think that when it comes to like how you pick your stories, yeah, you should pay attention to everything. You should look and see what people are saying. Part of news is reactive. You have to see what's happening in the headlines. You have to respond to it, and you have to dig into it and figure out whether the headlines are true or false, and tell people whether they're true or false. Right?
Here's the truth about news. This is a target-rich environment. We've never seen a news cycle like this. Under Trump, we had breaking news every day, and we thought we were in nirvana. Then Biden gets in, and he creates breaking news. It's all bad news, but nevertheless, he creates breaking news all the time. So, fortunately, Salem lets me do research. I research my audience once a year, and I just got my research back. The top 5 categories are all news and information based. That's what they want us to tell them. We have an information-crazed audience. They want to know the truth. Why is this? It's because they don't trust where they're getting the truth now. So we have to provide it.
Well, I'd say one more part to this. So there's the reactive part. We have to see what people want. There's also the proactive part. We have to find the stories that are not being told. Because there's a whole lot of stories that are not being told. And if you let other people decide what those stories are, you're always going to become, that means the mainstream is always going to be led by the corporate media. So there is a proactive element to it too, which I think is where investigative journalism comes in.
Yeah. With the exception of Salem, you might characterize yourself a little bit differently, Phil, but if I'm missing this, you can slap me later. But definitely for the 3 of your organizations, you guys are not explicitly, obviously, faith-based organizations. You're news organizations, but honoring faith is in the, and what you'd say would Salem say it's a little more leaning that way?
We're a Christian-based company.
Yeah. But that reports the news, yeah.
But we report the news as straight as we can report it.
Okay.
And we don't try to skew it. Look, we'll cover stuff that's religious, but we'll also cover everything else.
Right, just so people know. But that said, faith seems to be in the DNA of what you do and why you do it, which is, I think, why the faith community feels so welcome at your places. Can you talk about that, Chris Ruddy?
Well, Newsmax is a non-religious news organization, but we recognize that America is a nation where faith has played a vital role in the creation of our republic and is very dynamic in our society, and it should be reported on and covered. And what people of faith, whether they be believing Jews or Christians, do, and what's happening in the public square relating to them, is important news. And for the media just to ignore it, if you do look at some of the polls, most Americans believe in God. They pray daily. They have some faith set of values, 70% of the country. And that's, I think you don't, if you tune in the nightly news, you're not going to see that perspective. You wouldn't even know faith really exists as a vital part of American society. And it does. And so we treat it as news. We believe in that. But I would never hire a journalist based on their religious faith.
Right.
And we don't do topics that say, oh, we got to cover religion today. It's just part of our, I wouldn't say DNA, but it's part of the news cycle for us.
Yeah. Chris Dolan, thoughts?
I think for us, I mean, we are owned by a religious organization, but at the end of the day, it's anti-communism, right? I mean, and what you see with what's going on with social media and stuff right now, people might have mocked that 10 years ago, but for that family that owns the organization, communism is very bad. And it's against religion, and there's a reason it's against religion. So our whole organization is designed to allow freedoms that ensure that religion is treated fairly.
Okay, so Josh and I were talking right before this panel, and I was telling him that a congressman I used to work for, I asked him one late night, we were, there late, and I said, Congressman, what do you say to the accusation that conservatives try to legislate morality? And he said, oh, it's true. He said, but the other side, we're legislating to defend and preserve thousands of years of time-tested morality, and our opponents are trying to legislate a new morality. Let's just call it what it is, right? And Josh, you reacted to that. We're talking about the religion of the left, because I think we have this view that there's the faith community and then there's the secular community. But you've said, based on your studies of China as well, that they're maybe more religious than the religious.
Religion tends to, good religion tends to tolerate other religion, because you can't force people to believe in something. If you force people to believe in something, you're destroying faith. You're destroying religion. That, in my opinion, based on history, that's the reality of it. You're going to damage religion if you try to force it on people. The left right now is based on a worldview that is a anti-religious worldview that does have some in its roots, religious, kind of religious base informing it. And what they are running is an inquisition. As I mentioned previously, they're running an inquisition where they're saying if you say anything that questions their faith and if you don't accept their faith, you're going to be attacked. If you don't accept their beliefs, you're going to be attacked. They're pushing a morality of immorality. You're not allowed to believe in morality. If you say you believe something is good, fine. If you say you believe something is bad, you're going to be attacked. You can't have a moral foundation anymore and express your moral foundation, because if you have a moral foundation, it means you believe in right and wrong. And if you believe something's wrong, they'll attack you for it. That's the reality of it. And to try to push values out of media, which is, I think, what a lot of people want to do, is to, I think, ignore the values that inform politics and ignore the values that are the foundation of everything we do. My show is not a religious show, Crossroads, but I have religious people on all the time, and I let them express their faith, because their faith expresses their belief, and their values and opinions are a reflection of that. Right. You can't pull that out of people,
And leftism is a religion. Right. Everything they touch, they destroy, but it is a religion.
And they're better at it.
They're better at it. They're more cohesive. They don't shoot inside the tent. We like to shoot inside the tent. Drives me crazy, but I see it all the time. And I even tell my guys, because they want to attack each other sometimes.
And they don't have problems with doctrine, because they're very strong on doctrine.
That's true. But I tell my guys, the enemy is over there in that foxhole, not here in our foxhole. So don't shoot at our guys, shoot at them. But look, most of us at this convention are of the Christian faith. The Christian faith basically is good. We've made some mistakes, but we try to make things better. We try to feed the hungry. We'll send money to Haiti and Guatemala to feed starving kids. I mean, we're constantly looking for ways to make this a better place and a better world. Unfortunately, the enemy, the left, with their religion, they would destroy everything good that we would build.
Okay, so this is a very negative conversation, which it has to be. It has to be. So, as we're rounding our final lap here, Chris Ruddy, if you can ponder this, I'd love to know your answer to this. When you think about this whole conversation, what gives you hope?
Well, look at some of the data. I think there's some bad stuff we're seeing, but we also see that there's a great silent majority in America, to steal a political phrase, of people that still are with us, basically. So the Gallup study on ideology and politics just was finished like 3 weeks ago, and it looked at 30 years of data. You can look it up online. What it showed is that 37% of the country is still conservative, which is a pretty good number. 36% is moderate, independent. And Gallup admits that we looked at those 36% and found out that most of those folks are conservative. They just don't want to call themselves conservative. So we're the majority. That's good. But the Democratic number, the liberal number, is at 25%. And that's been pretty consistent. It's up actually from 18% to 25%. So it's been growing. But the big thing that they saw in the Gallup reported, is that people are really liberal among Democrats. They used to be a fraction of the Democratic Party. They've gone from 25% to 50% of the Democratic Party. So the impact of media bias is really felt in the Democratic Party, which has gone far left. Joe Biden used to be your garden variety centrist Democrat. He used to be considered more moderate. And he's gone far left. Nancy Pelosi, far left. They're buying on to everything in the woke agenda. And the Democratic Socialists, who are really extreme, they don't even want members of Congress to go to Israel. And they're shaming members of Congress that go to Israel because they think it should be boycotted. That's how far left these guys are. And that's where I think the danger is. But the good news is that most of the public's with us. We just have to figure out a way to communicate directly with them, because we're being blocked by, we speak to our audiences, but largely we're being blocked speaking to the mass public. Wow. Or it takes a while.
Chris, same exact question. What gives you hope?
I think these organizations give me hope. I think, the evolution of the internet's still ongoing. And I think there's a lot of conservative groups that are going to find a way to compete on that level that Google and Facebook may be at now. It took them a long time to get there, and the internet's really just changed over the last 10 years. So as those things stand up, we'll get access to more people. I'm confident that common sense approach to politics, common sense answers to policies, border wall makes sense. People know that. It doesn't. Then the moderates really respond to that. So the numbers that were just cited indicate that if you can legislate even with a moderate temperament, you're going to do pretty well if you can get the word out. And I think the word is starting to get out more with more and more organizations. So I think the evolution of conservative groups and social media is really going to help lift. It's just going to take some more time. And right now we're weathering a pretty rough storm.
Yeah. Phil, what gives you hope?
Well, what I would say, I don't encourage any of my hosts to run for office, but last summer, Larry Elder, who's one of my hosts, took 3 months as a leave of absence and ran for the governor of California. And out of 46 candidates, he came in #1 on the opposition. Didn't get enough votes to unseat Gavin Newsom, but he was the victor of that group.
Right.
Now, my point is, I just walked across the Delta walkway with Larry as we came over. Larry's sitting out there across the Delta lobby doing his radio show right now. I'd encourage you to go up, sit out there. There's chairs out there. You could watch him. As I was walking across the Delta walkway with him about an hour ago, he got stopped every 5 feet by people admiring him, wanting to shake his hand, wanting to take selfies with him, and thanking him for running for a race that he lost. Think about that for a second. Now, I asked him, I said, does this happen now all the time? He said, all the time. He said,
Colonel,
10 times.
Colonel West is here too. He's getting the same reaction. Yeah.
Who?
Colonel Alan West, same reaction.
Is he? Yeah, I'm not surprised. Larry said 10 times more reaction than he had before he ran for governor. So I think people respect the fact that you put everything on the line, like Larry did. He took himself off the payroll and off the radio to try to save California. Unfortunately, California's unsavable is lost.
Unsavory, too. I'm an escapee, so maybe I'm a little bitter. Josh, what gives you hope?
I see a lot of hope, actually, because I think in my view, I kind of have an idea where America is at right now. And it reminds me of a story that was told to me by a Cuban dissident. It was interesting. His crime was criticizing the regime. He was thrown in prison. He was there for, I believe, more than a dozen years. And I was talking to this guy, and he was telling me about what it's like in the prison. He says they're killing people, they're jumping on people's heads, they're beating them, torture like you wouldn't believe, and it's daily. It was a nightmare, anything we'd think of, just nightmare environment. And I asked him, being in that environment, what was it like? And he's very soft-spoken. He says, it was beautiful. And I'm like, wait a second, how is that beautiful? And he says, it was beautiful because you see the strength of the human spirit. You see that when dictators control everything, that there are limits to that power because they realize they cannot crush the human spirit. And when the people were being tortured, when there were people jumping on their heads, when they were beating them or whatever else, they looked their torturers in the eye and they knew that they had won. And there was this victory that took place, or the people torturing them had to look away because they knew that they could not conquer them. And I think if you look at where this country's at right now, and a lot of countries are at right now, let's face it, like the socialist types, they control just about everything, but it's weak. They find that they can control everything and they can become lame duck dictators. It doesn't matter what you control if people don't believe you, if people laugh at you, if people don't listen to your absolute control of the establishment media. It means nothing. And I think that is where this country is at. And as people continue telling the truth and continue exposing things, they know that their lies cannot stand the light of day. And that brings me a whole lot of hope.
Could I get a potential amen from the audience for any of those that would agree that Josh Phillips should quit his job and become a preacher? So I wanted to say to each one of you, what a privilege it is to sit on this stage with you. My two oldest boys are here at this convention, their first NRB, and you guys are my heroes, and you're their heroes too. And every day when they're done their homework and their chores and stuff, their fun is going on to your various sites and watching and listening and absorbing all that information. And we talk about it every night at dinner. And you have no idea the legacy and the impact that all of you are leaving for future generations, and how many future leaders you're creating just by creating the content you're creating and allowing the conversations that you're allowing. And I think everybody in this room and everybody watching owes each of you a debt of gratitude. And I just want to thank you all for being heroes to so many of us, standing up for us.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes, Phil, we have 53 seconds, so go. And you're a radio guy.
I'm a radio guy, so I can do it in 15
Phil
seconds.
Boyce,
there
53
has never
seconds.
been a greater opportunity than right now for those of us in conservative media to do what we have to do. And the opportunity is staring us in the face. And that's why Salem has started Salem Podcast Network and Salem News Channel, in addition to the Salem Radio Network. The opportunity is there. The listeners are there. They're craving what we do. And despite the cancel culture and the threat and the fear, I think we have a reason to exist.
Yeah, Chris, wait.
He did such a good commercial. I'm only going to take 10 seconds. On your hotel, on your hotel room, it says Internet TV. You hit it. You hit YouTube, put in Newsmax, so you can watch us while you're here at the hotel.
Oh, wait. We got to do ads. We got to do. Josh, your pitch.
Hey, Epic TV, EPOCHTV.com. I think future is now, right? I think true media, it's here. It's already here. You don't have to look for it. It's already here, right? Yeah. Yeah,
and we have this whole discussion about if it's Epic or Epoch, and I'm so confused. Let's go with Epic.
Go with both. You can say either.
Yeah. Okay, Dolan, come on.
Support us all. We need your support. We need your subscriptions.
Okay, we're done here, but if anybody wants to come up and thank these guys, I would strongly encourage you to do so, because they do hard work every day, and often it's thankless work, and it's great to hear from folks. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Thanks, everybody.
This was great. Thank you.
I still got stuff.